And welcome back. Thanks for your company here on Richo and Jones with Peter Reith, and now with Jason Clare, Shadow Minister for Communications. Welcome, Jason.
Thanks very much, Graham. Good to be here.
Now, can I just start off, because today obviously is actually a good day to have you here. I mean, I don't think I knew about it when I asked you to come on the show, but obviously today the criticism of Labor's role in the setting up of NBN, if you like, the chaotic nature of how it all came to being in an 11-week period, and I heard Stephen Conroy today making his comments. Do Labor bear a responsibility for a botched job in introducing the NBN?
Look, I think the NBN, as conceived by the Labor government, is the right project. We got flogged in the last election, but not many people voted for Tony Abbott because of their NBN model, their second-rate model.
There was never a poll that showed that your NBN model was less popular than the then opposition.
Overwhelmingly, people want the NBN, they want fibre to their home.
Yeah.
The major criticism that I've made since I've received this portfolio is that it just rolled out too slow. And it's still rolling out too slow. People are sick of the arguments, sick of the politics. You know, the point Graham Samuel made today, and I think it was a pretty accurate one, was that this report is in large part political payback. Malcolm Turnbull, Stephen Conroy have got a lot of personal enmity between them.
They do.
And they're fighting over, there's a history war here on the NBN. I'm not interested in that. People aren't really interested in that or the excuses. They just want the fibre to their home. And we've got to build the thing, build the bloody thing quicker than it's being built now.
Yeah, how can you say that? I mean, look, Bill Scales, a pretty decent bloke, you know, head of the Productivity Commission. He's asked to do a report. It's an audit. I mean, he's completely, you know, slashed the Labor Party for their incompetence, for setting up a business that could never actually achieve the outcome. I mean, you couldn't get a more blackening of Labor's reputation. And here we have, you know, frontbenchers on the Labor Party saying, oh, look, let's talk to the future and how popular it'll be, etc. I mean, I would have thought surely the Australian taxpayer is entitled to be very unhappy about how this thing's been managed.
Well, I'd say a couple of things. First, if the government's serious about the report, they'll implement the recommendations in the report. And the report says if you're going to do a big project, then it needs to be fully costed by the Productivity Commission or Infrastructure Australia.
Yeah, that's fair enough. But I mean, I'm talking about the past and what happened and how badly managed this thing's been done.
No, and I've made the point that my major criticism of the project is it's just rolled out too slow.
But it's
and
that's not
still
what
being
Bill
rolled
Scales
out
says.
too slow.
He doesn't say it was too slow.
I think Bill Scales does say it's too slow, but he says it's too slow because it was badly organised in the first place. For instance, the question is, why would you try in 11 weeks to do so much when most people would say it'd take you 12 months? Why try to do so much in 11 weeks?
Graham, we had 12 years of nothing happening. 12 years of nothing happening under the former Liberal government. Under the Labor government, we opted to try and roll out with the support of Telstra. They opted not to bid in the first place. Then Cabinet committees looked at another option. Cabinet decided on another option, but it's not just Cabinet or Cabinet committees acting in isolation. There was an expert panel who examined this. McKinsey and KPMG did an implementation study that found that if you build the NBN as conceived by the former government, that it would deliver a return on investment. You know, often people are talking about costs. It's important to make the point here that this would deliver a return to taxpayers. This is like building a railway track and then you charge to use the railway track and would deliver money back to taxpayers. But on top of that, then a business plan was developed, and it found that this would in fact deliver a return to investment, ticked off by Treasury, Finance, but independent accountants as well. So I don't think it's fair to say that this was all done in a hurry, because the facts don't bear that out.
Can I put it to you, I mean, if you don't mind me saying this, you're one of the better people on the front bench on the other side, on Labor side. No,
I hear a but.
Well, no, it's not a but. It's not a but. You got me. But seriously, I mean, the thing has been botched, and wouldn't it be just better for the Labor Party, you know, senior people to say, look, we're not going to go back over the thing, but we acknowledge that there are quite a lot of problems with the NBN, And we'd also probably acknowledge that setting up a government company, to do this was probably not the best thing to do either. Now, I mean, if you did that, you'd give yourself a clean start, which, quite frankly, I think when you're in opposition, there are things you need to dump, and that's one of them, basically, rather than trying to hang on to a situation which, even if the polls at one stage showed people like the idea of the NBN, I tell you what, by the end of it, they certainly are not going to.
Peter, and I've been critical where I think it's due. But I'd also make 2 points. First, you ask all the experts in this area and they'll say that the end game, where this all ends, is fibre to people's homes or fibre to their business. The real debate is, do you do it in one stage or do you do it in 2 stages? We opted for 1, this government's opted for 2. I suspect it's going to take a future government to come down and finish it off. The second point is, what's the role of government here? And I'd argue that this is a natural monopoly. It's like electricity wires or poles. There's no point having 2 companies running down the street, or government and a private sector company running down the street delivering the same infrastructure. You develop a natural monopoly, and Malcolm Turnbull's called it that, a natural monopoly, and then you allow private companies to compete on that, and they're the internet service providers that provide services to the Australian people. Now, if you adopt a private sector only model, you get what has happened in the United States. Google is doing this in Kansas, in Missouri, and what they're doing is they're providing fibre to people's homes to richer suburbs where more people are signing up, and the poorer suburbs are either the last to get it or they miss out. That's the problem when you go down a route like that. You get a Swiss cheese approach.
Well, I mean, it's not just where things are at the moment with the technology. The other thing that worries me is I was just looking for my phone, actually. I was going to pull my phone out and say, look, look at my phone, and what is it? Well, it's actually, I do a lot of stuff on Wi-Fi. And you're not into Wi-Fi, are you? The government's not into Wi-Fi. And the fact is, in the next 10 years or 15 years or 20 years, the world's going to change again and again and again. I mean, we only 3 or 4, 5 years ago, we had 1G, then we had 2G, 3G, now we're under 4G.
To follow that argument, then you wouldn't be doing what Turnbull's doing. I mean, that was the argument.
Well, I'd do it by the private sector. It'd be a hell of a lot cheaper, and it's not going to cost the taxpayer.
I wanted to get on to cost, because obviously the cost blowouts must concern you. I mean, and it's hard for Labor to say, whoops, we didn't know that was going to happen, or shouldn't you have known it was going to happen? Shouldn't there have been a proper costing? Because it seems to me the one thing that's really hard to defend is the costing. Well,
I'd make 3 points here. First, the taxpayer investment under the Labor model is $30.4 billion. The taxpayer investment under the Liberal model is $29.5 billion. So that's less than $1 billion between the two. The second point I'd make is that government gets a return on its investment. As I said, it makes money out of this project. And the third point I'd make is this. If you compare this project, $40 billion to build an NBN, versus the paid parental leave scheme, $50 billion over a decade to give money to people to have children, which one, Graham, do you think would deliver a bigger productivity benefit or participation benefit to the economy? NBN or paid parental leave? I know which one I think it'll be. It'd be NBN. I don't think anyone is going to support paid parental leave, not even Peter when he was really going to support it. He can't be out and bucket it too far, but he won't support it either. It's an important point. We're putting the microscope, as we should, under the NBN. It's a big investment, but it's going to return money to the taxpayer. But paid parental leave isn't subject to the same sort of independent analysis or cross-examination. The other thing that concerns me, though, you sort of... It's now been going on for, what is it, 5 years or 6 years or something. We've been going round and round the track here for a long time. It just looks so sloppy. The beginning of this scheme, the way it was hatched and the way the delivery started, just looks so sloppy. And that's not going to be registered as a great credit for your former government. I mean, I know you weren't responsible personally, but I worked in the infrastructure industry for 5 years before I got involved in politics, before I was elected to Parliament. And I worked on the M7 project, the big motorway that Transurban built in Western Sydney. And so I bring to this portfolio a bit of experience in infrastructure. One thing you learn there is that you get better the more you do at it. I suspect in 10, 20 years' time, people will look back at this and wonder what all the fight was surprise about, because you'll wonder what you did without the NBN. Sure, there's early problems. They need to be fixed, need to improve the construction model. Part of the early problems, I suspect, had to do with the early fights with Telstra, and then Telstra not being involved.
That held it up for a long time, because
absolutely
there was a drama with Telstra forever.
But no one's going to be looking back in 15 years. They're going to be looking back at the next election and saying, oh, hang on, you know, how many people have got this thing and how much does it cost? And
Peter,
do we really want it?
That's a good point. And can I just draw your attention to one of the commitments that Tony Abbott made at the last election? He said everyone will have the NBN by the next election. He said everyone will have 25 megabits per second available to them by the next election. Now, the day Holden announced they were pulling out of Australia was the day Malcolm Turnbull went into the Parliament and said, sorry, we're not going to be able to meet that commitment. Well, come election time, I'll be reminding everyone, Bill Shorten will be reminding everyone that they made a promise that they're not delivering. You're not getting the NBN by election day.
All right, look, we're going to have to leave it there and just contemplate when we come back. The first question is going to be, was it right, was it proper to have this off budget? It strikes me when you've got all these billions, then I think taxpayers are entitled to be able to look at the budget and say, where is it? And if you have a good look, it's very hard to find. We'll be back in just a moment, that's a promise.
In this fast-paced, interconnected world, it's a challenge to keep up to date with all that's going on across the globe, including the latest political climate, business affairs and economics. Each week, The Economist brings it all together to help you stay on top of the key issues that matter most. Don't miss this week's issue. Pick up your copy today or go to economist.com. Access the world, cover to cover. The Economist.
Small cats share the same instincts as big cats. That's why Whiskers makes sure your cat gets everything they naturally need. Discover the big cat in your little cat at the Whiskers Australia Facebook page.
TPG presents our Super Value Bundle. Get unlimited ADSL2 Plus and home phone line rental. Plus, unlimited local and standard national calls to landlines. Plus, 100 international minutes around the world per month. Plus, a Wi-Fi modem. All for $69.99 a month. Yep, $69.99 a month. TPG is a multi-award winner.
tpg.com.au.
At Medibank, we believe in better health from day one. So claim 2 pairs of designer glasses from Specsavers straight away. No gap to pay when you join Hospital and Extras by August 15. Better health from the get-go. All part of Generation Better. Search Medibank today.
Excuse me, can I help with anything?
Sure.
This is...
Creating authentic Italian meals is as simple as using the right cheese.
Can I help with anything in here?
Of course.
No celebrity chef required.
You've got to get your hands dirty if you're going to achieve the impossible.
This is Mask, Alabama. We have a potential piracy situation.
Stay with me. Stay in the now.
No one does it better than you.
We stand for good together.
No one does it better than you.
Tonight on Paul Murray Live, the case of Cute Little Gammy has got a lot of people talking about surrogacy, how it should and most certainly shouldn't work here in Australia. A special debate. Two of our favourites, Darren Hinch and she's back, Janine Perrott. Tonight, only on Sky News.
Welcome back to Richo and Reith. I may as well just say it for the last time. I mean, it's just so tragic. Now, Jason, we were talking about accounting rules. Is that really the reason why you don't have this on budget?
I think it is. I think it's because it actually delivers a return over time. So it's an investment rather than a cost, which is the reason it's off budget.
Well, let's hope it. There's some conjecture as to whether it delivers that or not. Now, I want to turn to something completely different. I had a fairly big argument with Andrew Bolt on radio yesterday, and because of a column he wrote yesterday, but it's not just him, there's a number of commentators basically saying that Labor is changing its position, and I note the resolution at the New South Wales Party conference 10 days ago, but they're changing its position because of votes, Muslim votes in Western Sydney. This is obviously on Israel and Gaza. Now, you've got an electorate with a lot of Muslim voters. I'm not sure whether you're the most or the second most or whatever, but how many Muslim voters are in your electorate? What's the percentage?
Well, my electorate's very multicultural. About 50% of people are born overseas. I'd say probably about 20%.
By the way, this is Blaxland, which is Paul Keating's electorate.
So I think probably about 30% of my electorate would be Asian background. About 30% Middle Eastern background, I'd say, and about maybe 20% Muslim.
20% Muslim. Well, that's a heavy percentage. Now, can I ask you what your position is on what's been happening in Gaza? I note there's a pull-out today.
Well, I think people on both sides have been let down by their leaders. In Gaza, you've got Hamas using schools and hospitals to fire rockets at Israeli. They've been to Sarot, places in Israel where they've been under attack, and they're doing it knowing that Israel is going to respond and their own people are going to be killed, and they'll acquire sympathy as a result. So that's atrocious behaviour. On the other side of the coin, you've got Israel that is acting disproportionately. You look at the front page of The Economist this week, and they're saying that Israel's winning the battle but losing the war.
It's certainly losing the propaganda war.
Well, you can't have a democracy that has a military strategy that involves killing thousands of innocent people and lots of kids. And that's what's happening at the moment, and they've lost the support of the UN, and the US has been critical as well. And I'm not an optimist here. You know, they've been fighting over this land since the days of, Richard the Lionheart, and ever since Israel was created. They've literally been fighting on and off.
Well, I don't have any great idea how to fix it either, because nobody... But the two-state solution has to be, does it not, at the very heart of a solution?
Well, it does, but you've made the point, I think, recently that the majority of the Israeli cabinet doesn't want a two-state solution.
That's right.
When I was in Israel a couple of years ago, I scoured for information on this, and unfortunately found that a lot of people preferred the status quo. Now, this shouldn't be beyond people. If you could do it in Northern Ireland, you should be able to do it here. But it just seems like it's all too hard. You've got a place like Jerusalem, which is the epicentre of Christendom and Judaism. It has the third holiest mosque in all the world. So you can understand why the monotheistic faiths are all converging on this space. But surely it's in the interests of all the world, including Australia, to try and resolve this between two states behind two secure borders. And we should use our time remaining on the National Security Council to try and push for a restart of the peace process.
Are we seeing a bit of a shift, do you think, in the policy position of Labor on this? Because you've got quite differing views, perhaps not so publicly obvious, but some of the Victorian members have perhaps a slightly nuanced position compared to others in New South Wales. Well, are we looking at a possible shift, do you think?
Well, and I said National Security Council. I should have said Security Council before, sorry.
I think we knew what you meant.
Yeah. The policy's been the same for a very long time, which is that we want a two-state solution. That's a bipartisan position. I think when Bob Carr was Foreign Minister, he pushed hard to make it clearer that all settlements are illegal under international law, and that we thought it was the right thing for the Palestinian Authority to be given observer status at the UN. I personally believe that's the right thing to do. You've got to push harder if you're going to get the two parties to come together. Otherwise, you're going to have the extremists on both sides of this, whether it's Hamas or the people who don't want a two-state solution in Israel, continuing to run policy in that part of the world, which is not what the people of those two countries want.
Well, I made the point on Friday that there were 24,000 settlers in 1983. There are over 300,000, just on 400,000 now.
Yeah, and the expectations are 500,000 or 600,000 over the next decade.
Yeah. It is a very hard situation, isn't it? I don't know what the answer is, and I'm not sure we're going to see the answer in our lifetime the way things are going. But I mean, Hamas, there's no two ways about it. I mean, they might get a truce now, but they'll be digging again and getting the
exactly. The rockets will still go on.
Rockets will go on again. And I don't know what people expect from the Israelis when they got rockets coming at them.
Well, it's just I think you hit the nail on the head. It's a proportionality of the response. Look, I take the view. It's got nothing to do with how many Muslims vote in your seat. When I wrote my column on Friday, it was because I'd seen babies, wrapped in white shawls being buried, and that's, to me, incredibly upsetting. And there's nearly 400 children killed. And I can't just sit back and say, oh, well, too bad. It's tough luck. I mean, it's more than tough luck. And I think we've got to find a way to stop that happening. Yeah.
But let me just, and we're not going to solve it here tonight, but let me end by just sort of giving a bit more perspective on my own electorate. This is an important issue, but it's not the number one issue that comes through my door or that people ring about every day. It's what you'd expect. It's the domestic issues, jobs and education and health. And at the last election, the big issue amongst the Muslim community as well as the Lebanese Christian community was aged care. The community's getting older. They want aged care where the nurse or the doctor speaks Arabic, where they can get the food that they want, because when we get older, if you come to Australia from another country, you lose your English very quickly, and you want aged care just like the Italian community did, the Greek community, the Chinese. And this was a massive issue, and it was an issue that dominated a lot of attention in the community in the lead up to the election.
So can I just ask you about the Muslim community in your electorate then? Last question on the issue. Do you think that there's a great many people there who believe in jihad and all the rest of it, that we see these extremists who go out in Hizb ut-Tahrir and all that who have the demonstrations? I don't think they're the average.
No.
The average person, are they?
It's the 1%ers. It's the minority. And the real problems exist not in the congregations at the mosques, but it's the people that congregate around the small prayer rooms where you're more likely to get extremist views. And I'm one of those people who worry about what's happening with people leaving Australia to go overseas. We saw after Afghanistan and the Mujahideen that created the rise of Al-Qaeda and then GI in Indonesia. I worry about Australians going overseas, but I also worry very much about Indonesians going over to Syria and Iraq and being radicalised, and what that might mean for Australia and the safety of Australians in the decades to come.
Can we just keep that going though, because I mean we've had the government announce its legislative changes, and I mean, do you have a first reaction to those proposals?
Well, this
is the proposal to keep information for a couple of years, isn't it?
Well, there's a couple.
No, I was going to go on the other stuff about it's a criminal offence to go to some part in Syria or whatever.
That part, okay.
There's a whole bunch, and most of them seem pretty sensible on their face. Right. And Mark Dreyfus and Bill Shorten today said, we'll look at the detail of the legislation. We've got to make... I come at this first as a former Home Affairs Minister who wants to make sure that our national security agencies have got the powers and the resources they need to keep our people safe. And so we need to do that in a very mature bipartisan way, but we need to look at the detail of the legislation.
Do you support the reversal of the onus of proof, though? If I go to Iraq, how do I prove I'm not a terrorist? How do I prove I wasn't fighting?
Don't go to Iraq, mate.
Well, but there's a lot of Iraqis here who've got relatives in Baghdad or whatever, or Basra, who want to go back and see them. How do you say to them, you can't go? I mean, this is a really difficult problem, right? But I've never supported the reversal of the onus of proof, because you can't prove you're innocent.
The Labor Party's introduced a whole lot of reversal of onus on.
I know, and I don't support any of it.
No, and I've written on saying I don't agree with it. Good. But I'd have to say, though, I mean, this is a particular situation, and I think I do like the measured response attitude, I'd have to say. I think basically the government's doing, they've got a set of proposals. I think basically in principle they should be supported, but I think it's also important that we have a proper discussion about it, because you don't want a system, where we're so concerned about whatever these fellas might get up to, that we start changing Australian law in a way which we would not otherwise normally accept.
But we don't want people coming back here,
we don't want them back here
holding severed heads.
No, exactly.
So I don't want them anywhere near me.
So we need to tread carefully, but with a basic proposition, which is we're going to do absolutely everything to keep these loonies out.
And Tony Abbott made a good point today. He said on these issues the two major parties work constructively together. They've offered a briefing to the opposition. We'll sit down with the officials to get more information on the legislation over the course of the next few days and weeks. And we've also said there needs to be proper public consultation, because it's only through that process that you find out where the problems are, like the ones you've potentially identified.
OK, we're going to have to leave it there. Jason, thank you very much. I mean, I know we spent a lot of the time talking about things that weren't in your portfolio, but these are huge issues.
They certainly are.
And I think they concern every single Australian. So I'm delighted we had the opportunity. Thanks very much. I hope we get the opportunity to do it again.
Hopefully.
And we'll be back in just a moment to sum up with the last few minutes of Peter Reith on Richo and Jones.